Welcome to the Echo Essentials podcast. My name is Chris Pekarski, and today I'm flying solo. My co-host is away this week, Dave. Have fun in the bush wherever you are. But today, this episode is airing during Kindness Week. And today I have a friend and former colleague up at Nipissing University, Dr. Andrew Weeks. He is a teacher in psychology, a specialist in more neuroscience. And today we're going to talk a bit about kindness and happiness, the links with virtual social contracts and giving for others and connecting with community and access to social media and just general beats of psychology interwoven with kindness and happiness. It's going to be a great episode. We cannot wait for you to watch it or listen to it, rather. But this week, I would be remiss to not talk a bit about Kindness Week at large. It is happening right now downtown. We recommend you guys come out and check us out between obviously June 9th and June 13th. This will be airing during. Come out to show kindness and support to all of our community, including downtown. Whether you're looking at, going to a shop or a restaurant, go down with some friends, connect, make connections with the community, go out there and just show some kindness to your fellow people out there. We recommend, if you get a chance, to visit our website, or visit the website is kindnessnorth.ca for more details, all happenings, things, events, places for Kindness Week. They're happening right now. Go check them out. If you get a chance, it's kindnessnorth.ca. Before we get to the episode, I do want to thank our title sponsor, the North Bay Regional Health Center Foundation.
Dear North Bay, as a single mom and full-time student, life can feel overwhelming and budgets are always tight. But one thing I never question is how deeply I care about my community. When I began volunteering at the North Bay Regional Health Center, I saw firsthand how much the healthcare system means to people, especially when life takes an unexpected turn. It made me think, what if it was my child, my parent, or my friend that was in need of care? That's when I realized I wanted to do more, to be part of something bigger than myself. I joined the I Give monthly club because even a small monthly gift can have a meaningful impact, helping ensure everyone in our community has access to the care they need right here at home. If you believe in strong, local health care, I hope you'll join me. Sign up at nbrhcfoundation.ca or call 705-495-8125. It's simple and it matters. With gratitude, Kim Cosgrove.
Today, we have an episode dedicated specifically around all different things psychology related, because we're on Kindness Week. We're looking at happiness and kindness. And my guest today, I'm solo. I don't have Dave Dale with me today. But today with me, I have Dr. Andrew Weeks. Doctor, how are you today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. It's been a while, Professor. From those who listen and those who watch, they know I come from a long time working at Nipissing University, where you are a professor. How has the last year been for starters? How you been?
It's good. We've come out of the pandemic years. Yeah. We've kind of reestablished a lot of our on-campus, activities and teaching and that type of thing. And it's always a challenge, I suppose, to move with the times. I'm in my 50s now, so moving with the times and trying to stay relevant to different generations of students coming in. But it's been good, and I've enjoyed continuing in my role.
I bet you've seen a lot of changes over the course of, as long as you've been in Nipissing. And, I go back from working at Nipissing. I was a student, for starters, from 2010 to 2015. I was an employee for the most part of the bulk of 2015 to about, got to keep the time on this one, 2022, I think. And then I came back for a brief stint recently. And so I've seen a lot of changes too, and things do change pretty quickly.
That's right. Yeah, and I guess maybe it's on brand for today's talk that we'll eventually get to around kindness and that type of thing. But I think those of us in the role that really love what we do, it doesn't matter what generation it is, the kind of the undercurrent pieces of being there and communicating like enthusiasm for things around neuroscience and psychology. It doesn't ever get old for me.
Perfect. And actually, on that note, for the listeners, because you were on one of our shows last year.
Correct.
You were on with North Bay with Love with Lisa.
Right.
It was a great show.
Appreciate that.
Listen.
Appreciate that.
Lots of good content. We suggest you go back and listen to those shows. For those who were not listening, who weren't watching that show, can you tell us a bit about yourself and what you teach at Nipissing?
Perfect. Yeah. So I am the current chair of the program. That's an administrative role where I kind of take care of the other faculty and that type of thing. But I came in the year 2000, and for a while it was kind of a funny joke. I don't know if they said this last year, but it's kind of a funny joke to say, yeah, I was started before you were all born and that type of thing. And so that makes me feel quite old. But in general, came in 2000, have really enjoyed being a professor there, kind of risen up through the academic ranks, I guess. Kind of boring, but kind of gone through that, had more and more experience. I've taught basically, and this maybe is helpful for a talk like this, I've taught basically over half of our curriculum over the years. So all the different courses and all the different areas, we tend to, at a place like Nipissing, need to be a little bit more broadly focused.
Right.
Yeah, but just to kind of narrow it in a little bit, I start everything with discussions of the brain, how the brain works. Neuroscience is kind of a fancy term that really doesn't mean, I always tell my students, it's not neurosurgery. We're not, learning how to actually cut into it or do anything like that. But we are focusing on the brain activity and connections and that type of thing first to explain behavior. So the reason I'm not in a med school or somewhere else is because I'm always tying it back to psychology. So all of the kind of older kind of cliche ideas that you kind of think about, all the way back to Pavlov and all those types of things are always brought in eventually with the conversation. But for me, anyway, with my focus, it's the brain first.
Fair enough. I mean, it's been a while since I've been a student,
right.
But I believe I took a couple psychology courses when I was there. I have to really go back and remember, but I always remember for a bit, and I think that still exists today, that there is, in psychology, there is a Bachelor of Arts and a Bachelor of Science route.
Correct.
The neuroscience, or the neurology part of it, is the Bachelor of Science route, right?
Correct. You can do it in both areas, but yeah, that's the focus area.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we talk about operations and behaviors of the brain, right? And, we talked a bit about it last year with, kindness in relation to happiness or social behaviors. Is there anything you're studying right now that's in relation to that before we get into some of the more specifics?
Yeah, not specifically, but I'll remind the audience if you'll indulge me. I think what I'd kind of stressed, and I think regardless of having a self-contained discussion, the brain, as I mentioned, I'll be very brief with this. It really is involved with a couple of rudimentary things. Of course, we think of it creating poetry and all the high-level things, but it's some rudimentary things as well. The biggest one is really whether we're going to like something or approach it. This is something I mentioned before, or we're going to avoid. Avoiding is, we understand that very well. This is kind of where the darkness comes out in everything. It's on the web, and you're being scared by everything, and it's pessimistic, and the sky is falling, and that type of thing. And we have a very strong system in our brain to do that piece, and we understand it really quite well. And so do marketers and everyone else online and so on. They understand that it's much easier to maybe get eyeballs on screens for those types of things. That activates our system, makes us want to run away. Okay, and so the brain's deciding that in any given moment whether it wants to do that. I think the other system that I mentioned is the approach system, and that's where we like something. We smell our favorite pizza or that type of thing, right? So the brain has really got all these systems that through evolutionary time has kind of set us up to either run towards something or run away. And just to kind of, before we get into it, the kindness piece and those are definitely on the approach. We have to be outwardly looking. We can't be coming from a position of self-preservation or that type of thing to do that. So.
Right.
Yeah,
that makes sense. I mean, for me, it's always fun to kind of it's funny because the brain's talking right now, right? It's talking about itself.
We're doing this with our brain.
We're doing it right now
with our brains, yes.
and they're always talking about itself. But you talk about gravitating towards something, right? Doing something, right? And people gravitate towards doing something for others, right? Which is what often kindness is associated with. Doing things for the sake of doing something for someone else, right? We talked a bit about how in previous year and this year, obviously, Kindness Week is sponsored and put on by the Canadian Mental Health Association here locally, right? In combination with lots of different community factors. Last year it was on Mental Health Week. This year it isn't, but we do want to talk a bit about that mental health piece if we can.
Right, absolutely.
So one thing that we talked a bit about before we came on the show today was about youth mental health in relation to kindness, or specifically social media. Is there anything you're finding out there right now?
So again, I'm glad this is a good moment for me to pause and just tell you again what I'm kind of able to discuss and whatnot.
Always.
Academics are always very anxious to make sure everyone's clear on what they can speak to. So I'm obviously fascinated by all of these things, and we do bring them up as examples in class and that type of thing. The first thing that I'll tell the audience, though, is that I'm not a clinician. I'm not a clinical psychologist. I don't do therapy or anything like that. So all my thinking around it is a little bit academic, and I wouldn't want anyone to take any of it. It's almost like a disclaimer. I wouldn't want to take anything without understanding where it's coming from.
Of course.
However, yes, from the mental health perspective, it's interesting because it gets kindness and outward looking and being there for others and that type of thing. it's kind of odd. It is kind of an antidote from all of my readings and thinking about it in class-based work. It's an antidote to being kind of self-absorbed and kind of depressed and anxious and that type of thing. Because when you're focusing outwardly and thinking about others, you're much less likely to be absorbed with your own kind of machinations and things that you're worried about. So so that's something that definitely has come into my classes over this year. We've talked about that in learning class and that type of thing. So nothing in terms of projects. I have been involved with some things relative to addiction and talking to clinicians about how the brain works with addiction. I've given a number of talks to different groups this year on that, which is a fascinating topic. It's quite clear if someone literally is absorbed by one substance or one activity, it's difficult to then turn around and be kind to others all the time. You're just thinking about the next
you're in a battle,
the next hit basically, right? Yeah. And that's maybe a little simplistic way of thinking about it, but that's your focus, right? There's really no other game in town than the thing that you're struggling with, right?
Yeah.
And then if everyone was in that mode to a degree, and of course I don't mean to equate the two, they're not even close to the thing, but all of us are sitting with our cell phones not too far away. And that absorption and being kind of so focused on that all the time and that drawing our attention all the time, that's going to be the opposite. Remember my approach avoidance stuff, that's going to be the opposite of focusing on others and thinking about others and what they might need.
Yeah, it's a really compelling way to put it, Professor. I think the phones have the power, and I'm generalizing. I'm not any type of scientist or any kind of support therapist, but I do know from my own personal experience, how about anecdotes, the phones have a power to draw you in, and they have a power to connect you, right? And sometimes it's kind of like what side of the line is this going to fall on today? What kind of person am I going to wake up like today? Will I want to engage? Will I be overstimulated? Will I be able to kind of give back and connect with a community or with friends? Mm-hmm. And social media has a weird way of kind of doing both those things at the same time, right? And I have to use social media for my job. I always have. A lot of us can't live without it because it's kind of the way we connect with family or friends. But it does kind of create either an opportunity to connect with those you haven't connected with in a while, or a barrier to not talk with someone normally if I can just talk to them on the phone. Right. And so at what point, would I be okay, well, I need to go beyond, talk about kindness, right? Simply.
Right.
There's a simple difference for a lot of people that I would probably assume with, if I were to call someone and wish them happy birthday or go see them, as opposed to sending them a message on Facebook, right? The surface level difference is a bit different, but does kind of is one more, kind or more thoughtful than the other? And I just feel like social media has a weird way of playing into that. And maybe I'm grandstanding on something I don't fully understand. But I think a lot of us just kind of want to know more, but there really isn't a hard and fast way to understand all this.
Oh, it's very complicated, and I love the context, because when people talk to me about from learning perspectives, what do you think about social media? Is it a bad thing? Is it a good thing? And it's certainly not my area of research, and I would defer to people that really focus on it. But I love reacting to people that are younger than me in terms of, because, obviously I, like everyone else, even all ages, have got some connection to it, but I didn't grow up with it, right? I'm of that generation where I didn't grow up with it. So it's a different thing. So I'll listen to my own kids and I'll listen to other students, and they'll say things like you just said, right? I don't want to say that I think it's a difference between Facebook contacting someone and showing up. I would assume so, but I want other people to make that real for them and how they feel about it. And then I can react to what, I think is probably out there in terms of research and that type of thing. So I don't, again, have a big pool of knowledge, but it is absolutely the case. One of the consistent findings that's coming out of all of this is that the connection, whether it's kindness, whether it's, all those approach things relative to whatever, the connection that we feel is stronger. It is more natural and is better quality, if you will, including brain chemistry, by the way, if we're actually in person and talking to someone. It's subtly degraded as you go down to just screens. So you got a video call, and then you just call, and then, of course, a message or a like or a heart floating up the screen or whatever it is that I don't fully understand all those things. And the emoji world is a mystery to me. I don't succeed in the emoji world very well. But in general, those symbols, those things. Right. If you go back and say, okay, that is something. It's better maybe than the old days where there was nothing. There was no contact. You mentioned contact across the world or having that's like the promise of social media.
Yeah.
That's the connection piece that is the promise of it. But right now, right, the evidence is pretty strong that it's not the same, right?
Yeah, you brought up like brain chemistry,
Yeah.
right, and how stronger it is when you remove a certain layer,
Right.
right? Like it's funny because like a lot of my generation will struggle making a phone call because they hate that idea, right? And I think depending on who the phone call is coming from or who it's going to, that might change a bit. But the idea of the phone call in isolation is like now essentially just lost. People will do like a video call instead, which is still really good.
Yeah.
But I feel like the phone call has become more antiquated in terms of style and delivery. But I think it's really interesting. But talking about more about kindness in social media. And again, like obviously you speak from what you know.
Yeah.
We can just spitball here. I see things and activities because I used to be really involved with Melanoma Canada.
Okay.
Through like a family story where we did a lot of fundraising for Melanoma Canada at the local level, at the countrywide level. And we were able to do a lot of those good things, through acts of kindness, through donation, through charity, through connecting with people on social media. So it does have the power to really do some good stuff there. It doesn't necessarily bring that personalized connection per se, because I might not know, who might be donating a different team or whatever.
Right.
But it has that power, and it just feels like whenever we talk about social media, and again, this is maybe a different conversation at large. It can go both ways, right? It's just such an open landscape, and I come from a generation. I always joke about my age on the show. People try to guess. I've always said I'm 33 at this point.
Perpetually.
Yeah,
Forever,
perpetually. I'm always 33.
Yeah, I think we all do that.
I'll take that. I remember when we used to have dial-up internet. I used to remember when we had to go home to log on to like MSN or whatever, and that was our digital connection. And it's so funny when I think about this, is that like I went from being with these people in high school for hours a day socializing, and I would immediately go back home to socialize them in a different way.
Right.
And like that idea is I don't know, it just feels really weird because now we're kind of disconnecting more. We're trying to get back out there. But I feel like I'd imagine there's probably some data here which you might know about. Maybe some data that doesn't exist. But I imagine the pandemic probably had a pretty profound effect on socializing and like social barriers. But it comes down for me, like kind of what thing about others, right? Like if I really want to talk to someone, I will send them a text first. And this sounds really bad because I'm like a really personalized person, but like I can't just go and knock on their door. Like I'm not 12 anymore. I can't just go door knocking at my friend's house anymore. Things are different now that you're 33. Right. But these methods in which we connect with each other. Because I used to love getting like a message on Facebook. It was like, happy birthday. And you would get like, X number. But now that I'm older, I'm like, thank you for all the birthday wishes. Not to sound ungrateful. That's the last thing I want to sound like. But like they don't have the same kind of, hit anymore. Like where you see like you're getting attention, you're getting thought of. It doesn't matter. I appreciate the more genuine approaches, the phone calls at midnight, the texts that have like more than just the generic keyboard prompts that they'll give you. But like I imagine some of those things are different for other people. But I really want to know because again, I'm years removed from being a student. You work with students now, and they are younger. You talk about how you were working at the university before they were born.
That's right.
And that is a wild thought for me, being born in 1991. Do you find that the students' approach to psychology has changed? Have you found that and again, I speak from the recruitment lens formerly, they used to love talking about neuroscience, right? That was a big hit. When they get to campus, how are you finding interactions with students on the psychological lens, like studying?
It's interesting. I think that all different schools are having different, foci in terms of having online delivery and other types of things. I think Nipissing still, certainly from my perspective, it probably is still going to be known for that in-person traditional thing. And it's interesting in some ways. It's like that's kind of it's antiquated in some ways, but it's still just incredible in others, right? So the ability to have people like in person, in class. You and I talked before we started about, subtle cues and facial things and so on. People will literally, of course, there's the obligatory, right, looking down when they don't want to answer a question or anything, right? But to your point, like one interesting question might be, is everyone just so, you mentioned you don't like to actually call anyone anymore. Is everyone just so shy that they can't ever come to class and talk? It's an interesting thing. Like it never would have been a thing when I started this ability to have students. Everyone was socialized to do that. They had come through school and they'd always, but now everything's so online. Could you have these people coming and not wanting to, and certainly that's maybe slightly up, but I still find that once, right, and I hate and bring the kindness, right? Once you have a kind, empathetic, right, understanding environment established, once, right, we are all in there and we know why we're there and there are no stupid questions. I know that's cliche, but there aren't any, in my opinion. Once you have that environment and that safety piece, it's amazing how people come out of their shell. Right. And to your point about like if people are feeling like it was kind of hollow or right, I should be getting all this excitement from my online interactions, but it's not. Right. So I'm actually finding a resurgence. And this is kind of a bigger discussion about what like, you know, it's akin to people saying, oh, I have to get back into the forest or, you know, forest bathing. I'm fascinated by that idea, right? So we're so in our basements playing, you know, video games all the time. Right? Do we need to get out and do we feel, well, research just says yes, right?
Yeah.
We do typically feel better once we get out there and reconnect and look outwardly, right?
We have to touch grass. You know?
Right. So you asked about the students. So yeah, I mean, I think the ones that love it, to your point, and I certainly love delivering classes in that traditional way. I don't know, it never gets old. I think it's a wonderful thing.
Summer is almost here, which means all the sports in summer is coming back. That includes baseball, softball, tennis, pickleball, you name it. If you want new gear, you want to get ready for the new season, there's one place to shop, and that's Source for Sports. Take me, for example. I'm playing softball this year. I need to get new gear to get ready for our season, which is just around the corner. I'll go to Paul and a team at Source for Sports and get everything I need, whether it's a new bat, new glove, new softball pants, or more importantly, a pitcher's cage, because when you get hit in the face with the softball, you want to make sure you have something to protect you. They got everything you possibly need and more down at Source for Sports. If you're looking at getting some new gear for all different sports happening this summer, go take a look. Go talk to Source for Sports. Wherever your journey takes you, please make sure to go check out Source for Sports at 1321 Fisher Street so Paul and his team can equip you with everything you need this summer. Hey North Bay, it's time to celebrate. The city is turning 100 and Homewood Suites by Hilton North Bay invites you to the party. Be at home in our spacious suites, each featuring a kitchen. Yeah, a real kitchen. Also, enjoy our comfy living spaces and brand new fitness gear so you can keep feeling great while staying on budget. Planning a big bash or business event? We've got the perfect meeting spaces right here on site. Plus, with our partnerships at The Grand and Stock Transportation, your guests and delegates are in great hands. Want to know the best part? We're right beside the beautiful Cape Paceway, steps to North Bay's lively waterfront, and moments from downtown's shopping, dining, and entertainment. Celebrate the Centennial with us all year long with an exclusive discount. Just use the code Centennial when booking your stay. Be at home with Homewood Suites by Hilton North Bay. Join the party today at 495 Oak Street West or call us at 705-495-3000. The world that I was in when I was a Nipissing student is a very different world than I was as a Nipissing graduate.
Right.
It sounds really cliche. We talk about cliches, but there's so much has changed between 2015 and 2023 that like a lot of things have changed, especially at the global level. But like just being patient and kind with other people, right? Like the one thing I love about being a Nipissing student, and now I know I'm just kind of praising my alma mater.
We're falling back into the promotion of Nipissing. That's okay.
I've done it for so long.
We're in North Bay. We should.
It's fair. Is that? And this is true. This isn't even so much marketing speak at this point. But Nipissing was always very good at supporting the student, right? Student support services has always been like a champion at the university. And the professor relationship to student has always been one of like absolute understanding, right? And I think that's something that Nipissing was able to hang its hat on and still does because they were able to kind of make a student feel like they're being cared for, right? Because the profs, as you know, like your students' names. It's not just like a transactionary kind of relationship. Like they feel they can come to you for advice. They can come to you for opportunities, right? And I think in a weird way, like that does promote like student success and we get to happiness, but there is some sort of kindness element into that because when students who are paying a lot of this money, who are traveling across the province, sometimes even the country, to be here in North Bay, I'd imagine a lot of times they would, if they understand the university and what its core elements are of being student first, when they get that experience, like, okay, I understand. Like, I'm not just another person. They see me as, Chris, who has all these different complications and unique angles of being a student. It's not just being a student number anymore. And I think studying in person gives more of that. But again, maybe I'm just a little old-fashioned.
Yeah, and that's fair. I think you're right. And I'm glad that was your impression. And I'm glad you still hear that. It's never perfect. I'm sure there are people listening maybe that wasn't what I experienced. But in general, I think you're absolutely right. Kindness, when you add the compassion piece, right, and you add the outward looking piece, and yes, it could be part of your job. But I always found people, and generally, a few exceptions, but generally people in Nipissing are wanting to do that. They're wanting to be kind in the sense of what does that person need, right? It's another way of putting it is you're being selfless, right? You're thinking it, right, as opposed to selfish, and the inward focus that obviously we all are guilty of at times, but being selfless and kind of thinking deeply, right, about other people's needs and perspectives and that type of thing. That is the ultimate form of kindness, really, right?
Yeah.
Because that's understanding what that other person needs in that moment. I think last year I talked about sometimes you have to be tough, you have to be a little bit, cruel to be kind, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But what do they really need? And it's not easy. It's effortful. Comes easier to some people than others, and of course, there's this evolving. You mentioned it's so different 10 years. To me, it's always an issue as well of socialization. Like, how have we been raised that way? Have we been taught to be, kind, or that type of thing? That's always going to play into it and individual differences. But one thing, if you don't mind me jumping a little bit in a different direction, something just occurred to me that I wanted to bring up was, it's interesting that we need to have a kindness week, right?
Right.
And I'm not trying to. It's a wonderful concept, and I'm happy to talk about these things all the time. But in an ideal world, I guess, for most of us that think this way, it would be lovely if it was just kindness year. We would just all be as kind as we could be to each other. And that's maybe an interesting, indication of the fact that the modern world, at the speed that it moves with social media and our phones and issues around addiction and everything else that I've been thinking about this year, those things kind of draw us away from thinking, about others as much. And all the chemistry that goes along with that. Back, my first thing that I mentioned is that this approach, if it draws us into that fearful, anxious, depressed state, right, then kindness, like I said initially, could be like if we have a week about it and we have these conversations and whatever it is, it could almost be just drawing us in that other direction. Yeah. But back to Nipissing, I think in general we do our best to do that for people, and obviously it's never perfect, but I certainly try to run my classes that way too.
There was two things that you said that I really, really appreciated. You said it last year, and you said it here today that sometimes you have to kind of be a little mean to be nice, right?
Right.
I'm not sure if it's quite related, but I would have rather been told an uncomfortable truth than to be told something that would be a comfortable lie. Right. And one of the things that for me, I was never a perfect student, make no mistake. I had my flaws for sure, and I still do. But I eventually took a lot of, and maybe I'm getting slightly off topic. I took a lot of development and opportunity in failing, which sounds really weird because I don't want to encourage failing, but I want to be able to normalize it because there's a lot you can learn from that. And sometimes when you're as a student, you're chasing the number, you're trying to get the degree, trying to get it done, while obviously trying to learn and do all these things. Sometimes the pressure, especially with all the other global factors happening, it does create a situation of can you just help me? Right. And sometimes, and I'm really glad that I got a lot of help that I needed as a student. I also got a lot of help that was no, you have to learn that, you're going to have to take the lump on this one. Right. And that's a tough lesson to learn. It's a big pill to swallow. But it was one that I was really glad I was able to, because it allowed me to kind of understand hey, you know what? I have to be better. I have to do better. Someone kind of gave me the tough lesson that I couldn't teach myself.
And I'll just jump in. And it's actually, I want maybe for time memorial, if a teacher is in the right headspace, this is effortful for us as well. We don't want to, maybe there's an exception. I'm sure there's someone, that is someone, my prof was mean and whatever.
Yeah.
Those of us who are doing this, almost without fail, it's effortful to do that as opposed to just never have the conversation or just give the mark and not do. And again, then maybe this is a more personal statement. Those are things I think about. I think about how I'm going to do that, whether and what timing it would look like. obviously taking the time to have that, right? You have to take time. It can't just be a quick, oh, by the way, you'll never do that.
Yeah.
Right? It has to be couched and done properly. So kindness in terms of honesty and what people need is effortful. It's not easy. We don't like to do it. It'd be so much easier just to kind of brush it under the rug and stuff like that. But we could do this. Now, I have to couch this as well. Some people get really excited about, that's the way I am. I'm honest and I just tell it like it is. And that's not what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Like I'm talking about literally really thinking about it from another person's perspective.
Yeah.
And if you're in a situation like I'm in, when a student, you just said it, needs to learn that this isn't maybe going to work, or let's fail with grace and learn about failure.
Yeah.
Gosh, that's another 3 hours right there, right? In terms of what we've done with raising kids, even around this. And I hate to bring this up, but the participation medal, we call the participation medal era, like it's not right or wrong. It's just different from certainly what I was raised on. I mean, we learned how to fail. We failed a lot. We lost a lot. This is not a sports reference for people that are fans of various teams and so on. But we did learn to, and it made you resilient in some ways. And I think we get caught up in this of wanting to be kind, but kind in some ways, is, even if it's parenting or being a prof or whatever it is, kindness in some ways is not just being super nice and supportive all the time. It has to be, what does someone really need?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. What they want versus what they need.
Correct.
Right.
It sounds like a song, but
someone's probably written it.
They have. I'm sure they have. Some.
It's not going to be me.
There'll be a comment if we take comments on these things.
I'm sure there's political positions.
Many comments on what songs would be related to it.
Yeah. I mean, it's it's uncomfortable, but I think those conversations need to happen. And we talk about the outside forces, in terms of talking about self-preservation versus helping others. I know every generation has its challenges, and every decade there's something, a few things that are awful that are happening globally. It just feel like in our current global climate, and maybe I'm summarizing and generalizing a lot, but there is a lot of external pressures and stresses that are affecting everyone. Whether it's financial, political, oftentimes wrapped in the socioeconomic stuff. I'd imagine the process and then the plate load of a student right now is got to be massive, because there's just so much going on that they have to keep track of. Even when I was a student, I thought there was a lot to keep track of. I mean, I was trying to figure out when I was going to hang out with my friends afterward, and we had some different stuff. But having all these things and all these additional costs tied to being a student, when it's like, well, okay, I have to take care of me, because this we talk about the whole cup being full thing, right? Like, in order for me to pour some water back into your cup, mine has to be full, which I totally believe.
Right.
But it's almost like we have an extra layer of challenge in terms of giving back and being kind, as a student or as not a student, right? There's things that I would wish I could afford more, but they're just different now. Maybe this is a tough question to kind of throw your way, but how would you maybe position or rephrase someone who might be feeling those kinds of pressures, whether they be financial or external or something different than money, to encourage to still be kind while also still taking care of themselves? Is there anything that you know of?
Well, I don't, but I not specifically on that area of research, but I'll say the following.
Yeah.
Yes to everything. And I have this wonderful privilege of teaching in psychology where, in my mind, of course, I'm biased, but it's always relevant. Right? I'm in class. If we want to all of a sudden say we're overwhelmed and stressed and everything's coming at us, then we'll talk about that as the example of the day. And there'll be things to talk about relative to learning strategies and so on. I have one of my assignments is basically, look at your own learning and try to improve it and then write about it. And so I have this big advantage. But you asked about rephrasing. So what I'll remind a little bit of what I said last year was that we think that it's going to drain us if, like you said, and of course, self-care and kindness to yourself. And look, that goes right back to mental health, right? Obviously, any clinician listening to this would say, your self-talk is important, right? I'm not, again, I say this again, I'm not a clinician, but it's pretty obvious anytime we talk about this. What you're telling yourself in your own thought processes is relevant. It's not just kind of, a moot point. It's important to have relatively positive self-talk, and that's what therapy, of course, can bring you. But back to this point, okay, how can you be kind, right, when you feel depleted.
Yeah.
Right. So I'll just say what I said before. The systems in the brain and the systems of psychology and whatever it is, when you have a little idea and you just force yourself to do something, they immediately actually start to solve the problem. In other words, and it's really confusing for people that have never experienced this or don't think about it or aren't conscious of it. It's almost like I have nothing in the tank to give, but I'm going to try to give in a little way. And then all of a sudden you feel good.
Yeah.
Right? Like you've done something and you feel good and you've been out of your own head for a minute. And it's like then, of course, in all the ways that learning theory starts coming in, whether it's dopamine or other things like that, and I'm simplifying, it's going to be different for everyone's experience. But then you feel a little bit better. So instead of it depleting you further by giving, right, you've actually started to feel a little bit better.
Right.
Which you've now given to yourself. It's circular, and I know maybe I'm not being overly clear with it, but it's circular in terms of the chemistry of it. It's certainly when I'm doing this, I feel good about it, and then that helps me continue to do that more. So it's contagious, both personally contagious and then also contagious to others.
I think I know. It's tough to kind of grasp.
Yeah, it is hard.
It's tough. It's tough to like put. I think you did a really good job at putting it into words. The first thing I immediately thought of, not to talk about me, which sounds very self-interested.
No.
But I was trying to because we all do this. I'm like, how does this, do I do this thing that you just talked about? How do I connect what I think I'd be doing or not doing? Yeah. I'm coming off a bit of a cold. I'm doing much better. But like last night, I coach basketball, youth basketball.
Okay.
And I love doing it. And there's some days where I just can't do it because I have softball or I have other things, but I have to make them the commitment because they're kids. I want to coach for them. So even though I might feel some days where I have very little in my tank physically,
right.
If I go and do those things, I could feel better afterwards. And what's funny is that I had a wicked headache yesterday. I took all kinds of throat lozenges to make myself feel better. I just wasn't feeling good. I go coach basketball. I walk away feeling better. Right. And maybe there's something there chemistry wise that is saying okay, you're not only getting out and doing something physical, but you're also giving something back to people who want you to be there.
Right.
Right. And for me, so when you talk about, it's not so much, subtracting from your cup. It's almost multiplying what you can have to give to others.
Very well put. That's kind of what I was going for.
Yeah, it's weird, and I think everyone has different capacities for it. I think I like to think I'm a pretty extroverted person. I like to kind of go out and do stuff and give and give.
Yep.
There'll be days where I'll have to put me first, but I think when I do things like that, for me, I get more out of it. Maybe more than I thought I would.
Right.
Right, and it sounds very by the way, we won. Anyone who's asking, we did win the game. It was very close. I know everyone's wondering. But that's not all the reason why we do it. We do it because it's fun.
Right.
Right. And the kids have fun. You can see they're kind of buying in. Score aside, it was fun for me to kind of just do something that was difficult, something I had to do. So when you said that, I was like, okay, I know exactly what that feels like. You put it into words for me. Right.
And you bring up an interesting point where it's different for everybody.
Yeah.
You mentioned you feel extroverted and you're out there. So for you, that energy comes from giving in an outwardly way. But if you're introverted and shy, you don't have to give in that same way. Maybe you write something thoughtful and you present it. But think about it, the entire time you were doing that, you weren't self-absorbed in the way that, and again, everyone's got the right to be interested in their own self-preservation and maximizing their own ability. But I'm just can tell you from a neuroscience perspective, it's a different angle.
Yeah.
The brain switches gears. You're outwardly looking now. You're approaching that issue, right? Now, it can be done to extremes.
Right.
Right? I'm not a clinician, but we all know people that are so helpful that they're never dealing with any of their own
almost to a neglectful perspective.
Right. So humans are complicated, right? We're always have our own thing. But I guess I wanted to stress, it doesn't have to be that one thing. You can decide what that one thing is. But when you do try to be kind, when you do try to be honest and compassionate and outwardly thinking, even if it's even though someone deserves it in traffic, you decide to pocket the road rage.
Always.
That's in a weird way a form of kindness in that moment. You didn't escalate, you absorbed, right? And even though you may not feel happy about it in the second, you've done something on the positive side of human interaction, right? And that will actually potentially make you feel good in your head.
Yeah, it's even the small stuff, like you just said, just stuff in traffic. My partner's not from North Bay; she's from Parry Sound, and we always talk about how maybe it's just the seasonal driving, but people in North Bay are they cut people off. It's well, maybe, but maybe maybe it's me. Maybe I'm going too fast. Maybe I'm expecting them to read my mind, right? And people are complicated, right? We have different decision-making skills. We have different things going on. But just giving that a little bit extra grace, right? I know that's like a weird term to use in science, but like just giving someone like the extra chance of like just betterment. Like, you know what? Maybe they're having like a different day. Maybe they're not thinking about me. Like, why would they be thinking about me when they could be thinking about 1,000 things in their own car, their own head? But it's always fun talking about psychology with the professor. I know it's been a couple of years since we've had a chit chat and we went down to, your classroom or your labs or talked to what you're doing. But I do appreciate kind of getting to have this lens. Even if it's like more of like a broad lens or talking about psychology and happiness and kindness, because there's lots that we don't know. There's some stuff that we do know. There's stuff that always changes. But I love how you said people are complex, because I think we are complicated. We try to make things simple. It's not always simple. We're complicated. So, Professor, thank you for coming on the show. Before I toss it off, is there anything that you want to kind of address to the listeners or the readers, the viewers? No one's reading this show. Yeah. Maybe, who knows? Anything you want to say before you?
The only thing we didn't get to, and I'll be very brief.
Please.
And you mentioned complication. One of the themes that I thought about before today was this idea of where we are at different ages, right? So one thing, and some in your audience may have this totally buttoned up, but some may not remember this. So the thing I always tell people about being kind and compassionate, and it changes with age, especially when talking about youth. So if you go all the way down to like 8-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds, whatever, there's a big thing around them and that type of thing. By definition, they're more self-focused. Right. And so we always have to, as adults, as parents, as educators, whatever it is, we always have to keep that, kind of development piece. And I'll give you one example. The parts of the brain develop at different stages. So we obviously, the first things as we're born are our breathing apparatus and that type of thing. And as we're very young, I love it when people want to wave at babies from across the room. They can't see you, by the way. I don't know if you knew this. So they can't see you. These are things I know academically. So you have to wait for the eyes to develop and the brain to. So that's another example as you go up and up and up. And then you get into memory, and right, those type of things. Very few of us remember actual things from before we're 2. Yeah, that's because the memory circuits in the brain are developing. So you see my point. Things are developing in stages as we go up. And the last thing, and the evidence these days is actually, and there is even some sort of genetic male-female differences, which are fascinating. Okay. The last thing that we get is our frontal lobe. So if you imagine right under our forehead, that's the last thing that we get kind of fully mature. And what do I mean by, I could go on and on, but it's basically that it works, but it's not optimal. Right. What's in there? Well, guess what? Remember I mentioned road rage? Yep. Inhibition, control, our personalities, right? All those things, right? So I was, my students say, so that's why I was, bad at 17 or whatever it is. But you should always keep it in mind. So kindness can be, kind of handled at different, but maybe it's more rudimentary. Maybe it's more by modeling. Maybe it's like you get the kids that learn to be kind by the parents modeling that we're going to go out and raise money for something or whatever it is. Because those kids, and I left you hanging there a little bit. So 25 is really, or even like later, before the frontal lobes are fully mature. Right. So here, I'll leave you this last little thought around kindness and kids and understanding them from the brain development perspective. It's one of my leading concepts. We always talk about this in class. You can have a 13-year-old that can do world-level calculus, but when they get a question wrong, they can be upset about it. Right? So what does that mean? That means that the brain can do these wonderfully complex adult-like things, but until we get our frontal lobes, right, we can't be viewing people in the same way. Right. And just thought I'd throw that in there at the end, kind of a last little neuroscience piece that we should always keep track of. No, that's perfect. Okay. That's perfect. And I also never apologize. You can speak psychology to me for hours. Yeah, I know many pay. It's my training, I guess. Many will come to sing for that alone. Yeah. So the fact that I get half an hour, 40 minutes with you is perfect. So perfect. Wonderful. Again, Andrew, thank you again. We really appreciate it. Pay attention to everything Kindness Week. This is going to be airing on Kindness Week. So engage with the community. Go visit downtown. Check out our website. Check out the CMHA website. Pay attention to our socials for all things happening in North Bay and the area. So again, thank you so much. This has been the Echo Essentials Podcast. Thanks for listening.